Hello, I'm Doug, and welcome to the Krewe of Japan podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture. Welcome back to our podcast. Time to fasten those seatbelts again. We're back to finish part 2 of our 2-part series with Albo Agunday, discussing all things drifting and street racing in Japan. I hope y'all have forgiven me by now for that cliffhanger from last week. But don't worry, things are about to go from 0 to 60 real quick. In this episode, Albo touches on the approaches taken when learning how to drift.
For drifting on a toge, there's like specific, like this stretch of the road, like from this part to this part is the course. And then there might be like 6 or 7 corners, and then you learn each corner like sequentially.
Some close calls he's had along the way.
And I don't know how it happened. I was driving way too fast in that dark road because it was just a straight road. And at the very last second, I realized like I wasn't going to make it.
Cost considerations that come with drifting and street racing.
You know, it's not uncommon to go through like 1 or 2 sets of tires or like 2 or 4 tires during one track day. And so that might be, I don't know, like a $500 day or something.
Preconceptions of Japan's drift culture.
My initial preconception was that's how drifting was really like as an underground subculture, like in Japan. Like people would street race and then they would slide around the corners as like their main technique. It turned out to be much more multi-layered than that.
And so much more. There are many elements to street racing and drifting in Japan, and we're going to touch on a lot of them in this really insightful interview. So let's just jump on in. You know, you had mentioned like the drift culture and the aspect of like just driving and like that driving underground culture in Japan. It seems very niche and not a lot of people know about it. But could you, for the people who are maybe like me and are dumb, that don't know a lot about cars and racing scenes in Japan, could you like kind of define what drifting is for our listeners and how drifting and drift racing differs from other forms of automotive racing?
Sure. So, okay, so if you've ever seen like Tokyo Drift, you've probably seen, you know, shots of like these sports cars sliding around a corner, basically, you know, like power sliding around a bend. Or maybe another way you could visualize it is like I'm sure a lot of people have played Mario Kart, and you know when you press the shoulder button, you can get backwards slide.
Drift.
Yeah, so it's just like that. My initial preconception was that's how drifting was really like as an underground subculture, like in Japan. Like people would street race and then they would slide around the corners as like their main technique. It turned out to be much more multi-layered than that. There's like different subcultures. Like basically when you're a car enthusiast in Japan, the most common word that you might be referred to as is hashiriya. Which the closest translation is like street racer. So you're into like street racing, but it kind of has like a different connotation. It's another way you could explain it is kind of like a car enthusiast who likes to drive. And then within this idea, there's many different types of it. So you have people who their entire thing is they love the feeling of like drifting around a corner. And so there is just like the group of people who loves to drift. And then there's like the people who love going really, really fast, regardless of how they, what technique they use. So this is usually known as like grip driving, where you're trying to maximize the grip of the tire as you go around a corner. And then you have like other like sub genres of motorsports, like rally or hill climb, or like several others, snow drifting. And then you also have people who don't run on the mountains hard at all, but they focus all of their driving like at the circuit on the track. And so you have people who drift at the track, and you have people who just run like time attack or run races with other cars. So there's all these different types of it. So what I first initially came across, like what I thought initially was like in real life. So I thought real life was exactly like an initial D, where people would street race and they would use drifting techniques around like all these corners. This turned out to be kind of basically true. Like later on, I discovered like that is actually within certain toges, certain cars, certain drivers will actually initiate like a drift mid corner while they're doing these different styles of like battles. So there's like things like cat and mouse where these two cars will be like chasing each other, and if one of them pulls away, then the person who pulled away is the winner.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare for like the car to actually pass because it's very dangerous. Um, but with regards to like drifting specifically, it's interesting because in real life, the people who are like the most into drifting, you can think of it as almost like snowboarding on tarmac. Like they just love the feeling of like sliding back and forth, almost like this very very
It's like a leaf blowing in the wind,
yeah
right?
yeah yeah.
Like kind of
There's
going back and I don't
yeah
know. I'm
there's
just
no, yeah, there's definitely different styles of it. There's like some people like really love those really smooth long drifts. Some people
yeah.
like the really aggressive drifts, and some people like to go like tandem drifting, and they like to go like really close like together, and that's what gives them their thrill. Um, and if if uh, if you take it to the track, then there's like levels to that as well. You know, most people are just into it at the recreational level. But if you get really, really good, then you could get sponsored and you could become maybe a quote unquote professional drifter where you're sponsored by these racing teams, and then you go on to competitions, and then you go on to compete with other drifters in what is almost like figure skating on the road with a car. You know, you're judged on technique and style, and basically putting on a performance, which is not really about speed and like getting the fastest time around the track, but getting the most beautiful line around the track where you you get the back of your car to kick out, so you have you can demonstrate incredible control, and you can get a really really aggressive and difficult line around a corner, and that's what the judges look at, and they're like, oh wow, that demonstrates like a very high degree of control and skill. So that's
Yeah.
how they would award the points for that. um, but then like I said, you know, as I kind of got deeper and deeper into this, I also met other people within say other areas, other toges, who they like to do cat and mouse, but within certain corners, for example, if it's just hairpin after hairpin, they have the technique of just of drifting it. So in most of the corners, they run grip, so they use their tires to maximize the available grip of the tire. But in some corners, it's just like a switchbacks, back to back hairpins, and so it's sometimes faster to drift around those corners and to lose traction rather than to approach the corner and then you would brake to the fastest speed that you can take that corner, and then you would accelerate, and then as you approach the next corner, you would brake again and then take the corner and then accelerate. So it's like, you know, stop, go. Instead of that, you would just go as you approach it, kick out the back by like upsetting the traction, the balance between the front and the rear, and you would get like the back of the wheels like lock, or
Yeah.
to the way to transition to the front. So there would be more weight in the front, and the back would come loose, and you would just enable the car to kind of swing around. And it's so fascinating because it's so deep. Like the level of the level of technique is often such that it's kind of passed down from generation to generation of street racers. So it's like, you know, some people discover themselves uh, of how to do it, but other times, just like in other aspects of Japanese culture, there's often a very strict hierarchy system. So you have like the senpai kohai relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where the seniors kind of like look after the younger generation, and the younger generation look up to them as the source of truth of how to do whatever endeavor it is. So in this case, like drifting, um, the seniors will teach the younger guys the rules of like this particular area, this particular mountain. And then, okay, you can't cross the yellow line here. You can't pass here. Uh, when you're going down, follow me, and you're going to learn the breaking points, and you're going to learn where you can accelerate. And this, maybe this patch of the road is really rocky, so you need to avoid this area. And maybe this patch of this part of the mountain has this special like feature, and you can use that to your advantage, maybe in a race, things like that. And so a lot of these things are like so deep. And if you watch like knowing these things, if you then go watch initially again, you realize it's so much of it is like based in reality. And for me, that has been the most fascinating thing, to see how there's such a direct link between the real life version of it and the anime version of it. It's so cliche, but it makes living in Japan feel like living in an anime.
Have you been in many races, or do you participate in races like that, or just any races, not necessarily specifically drift, like like the mountain drifting or anything like that, but like any street racing? Have you done that personally?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in the mountains, like we would often like hang out with my friends, and we would go out into like after work, we would go out into the mountains. And I fancied myself a street racer, but to be honest, like my level of understanding was so much lower than theirs. Like even now, like I feel like I barely know anything, whereas they have such a deep, deep, multifaceted, multi-layered understanding. So, for example, they would understand what brand of tire and what exact make of tire is best for like this particular mountain, and which in what particular weather condition and temperature range, and then like how fast you can take each corner, and they would know it like corner by corner. Whereas for me, I would just go out for like a drive and be like kind of like tekito, the word tekito,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
means kind of like just kind of like winging it.
Experimentally, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Yeah.
send it and just kind of wing it, and then like somehow like not die. um and then sometimes I would come across, it's a funny story. So one time I was driving along. Actually, this is on my, it's happened a couple years ago, or last year or something. It's on my channel, where I was just driving along my car over here, yellow S2000. Okay, and then I come across like this another car in front of me, a white Nissan Fairlady Z, and I start, you know, when you're on a toge, sometimes it can literally turn into a kind of like initial D style like battle kind of thing, and not like a super serious one, but kind of just like playfully going down the road together, and it got more and more like intense. And by the end of it, we kind of both pulled into this parking area, like a michinoeki, like a highway rest area, kind of not highway, like a toge rest area kind of place. And I got out of my car to introduce myself, and the other driver did too. And it turned out to be this really pretty young lady. And I was like, oh my god, this moment is exactly like from an anime. And then I ended up talking to her for like an hour and a half about tires, and it was just so fascinating to see like the level that they take it, is so deep, and it's kind of a reflection of other areas of Japanese culture. Like for example, when we were Jets, did you ever like stick around and go to like the bukatsu, the after school clubs?
Some I did elementary school, so they didn't really have too much. I did some like kendo with kids, and like
Right,
my,
right.
my landlord was a kendo teacher, so I
Yeah,
ended up going like once or twice a week to kendo practices, but that's about it.
that's exactly the example I wanted to bring up. Like kendo, it's so deep, or like judo, it's so deep. It's like the basic technique is very simple, right? Just swinging
Yeah.
it forward, right? But you can break it down to such a fine level of detail that it takes like many years. And for some reason, maybe it's because of the school system. Japanese folks have this ability to be patient through years of developing a very specific skill. And that's what I really saw, and what really captivated me and still captivates me about Japanese car culture. It's like this level, this deep level of craftsmanship in whatever they do, that whatever endeavor they choose to pursue, they almost always, even if you're just like a random person with no particular innate ability, you get it to that world class level just through through commitment to the practice, and also you know through the relationship you have with your senpai and your seniors, learning from them and from their huge repository of knowledge that's been accumulated for generations.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
for
So
sure.
it sounds like races are spontaneous and kind of like I'm sure there are some races that are like only by invite, but I mean, you just had a spontaneous kind of encounter that one time
Ah, right.
with the girl, so
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I just realized now I kind of went on another tangent there. I didn't answer your original question.
No, you're
Uh,
good.
the second part of that question was like, do I like do other racing? Right now I'm just doing it at like the very amateur level, like taking my car to the racetrack for track days with local car enthusiasts, and like maybe some of my friends are affiliated with like a shop who will host a track day for everybody. So I go to those kind of things. Um, but to take it to like that professional level, I think it's quite difficult because the level of competition is just so high. It's kind of like if I decided, hey, you know what, I want to join the NBA, like now, and uh, it's especially for racing, it's something that your body needs to almost seems like your body needs to learn from when you're like a very very young, like before you can drive, like from when you're like in elementary school or something. As like the fastest guys, they raced go-karts when before they could drive. So it's like their body intuitively understands in this particular corner at this particular speed with this kind of feeling, yeah, you could take this corner. Like the tires can handle that, or like you have this intuitive sense. Whereas for me, I'm kind of like this giant baby. I'm like, oh man, that's too scary. I gotta slow down way, way, way before the actual limit is. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love it just because it's so fun to try to improve like little by little, even though likely I'll never get to that extreme level.
well, you're saying like you're like a baby with it. So like with your experience with drifting, I'm assuming since you're such a baby with it and you haven't like gone to the next level with it, I hope that you haven't had too bad of accidents, have you?
I So
Either to you or your car. I mean, I know cars get torn up like crazy.
I've had a lot of like close calls,
Oh, that's good.
where I look
Well,
back and
not
I'm like,
good, but like I'm glad that nothing happened.
I honestly I think I have like a guardian angel or something that's literally watching over me. I can tell you there was this. It still sticks out of my mind. There was this one time, I wasn't even like racing or drifting or anything. Like actually, we'll get back to it, but I don't really drift. I'm more into grip racing now. It's more of a money thing. But okay, the story was one time I was driving home after hanging out with some friends. It was this really really long and dark road, and as I approached this intersection, like the very strange thing about the intersection was you had to make a very sharp like diagonal, like it was like straight and then suddenly it was like a diagonal road, and then it became straight, and then over here there was like just the rice field, and first, and if you just kept going straight, you would just literally launch off of it and go into like drop 6 feet into like these rice fields. And I was driving my roadster, and that would most certainly mean like certain death. And I don't know how it happened. I was driving way too fast in that dark road because it was just a straight road. And at the very last second, I realized like I wasn't gonna make it, and I just remember I just cranked the wheel as hard as I could. And in that moment, I was like, "Oh no, I'm dead! Like there's no way I'm gonna make this." And I kid you not, it was like this happened, like going straight, and it was like that. So it just the car did teleport.
Oh,
It just moved laterally like 10 feet, and then I just kept going in a straight line. Um, so I've had several experiences like that where I think literally been watched over. Um, but I think the interesting thing about drifting is even though it seems you are really on the edge of control, the better you get at it, like you become like so in tune with the car, especially because the movement is so different from when you're just driving on the regular road, right? It's like the last thing you want to do is break traction, but when you're drifting, the first thing you want to do is break traction because that's what by definition drifting is. So Um, with my cars, uh, I've taught myself and like learned from some friends like these different techniques, but to get it to the point where like you're chaining them from corner to corner, I think that's quite difficult, and I'm not quite there yet. And I think it's very hard on the car, especially if you haven't done certain modifications, and you burn through tires and other consumables like your clutch like really really fast.
I was actually about to bring that up. Like just you had mentioned, you don't really do drifting anymore because part of it is cost. If like someone's wanting to do this, like what kind of considerations in terms of like cost and vehicle upkeep and time commitment for just practicing should they expect? I mean, I'm assuming, like you said, brake pads are like something you probably got to rotate out like pretty frequently. Tires too, because they treads get worn down real fast. So what is like a typical month? Like, let's say a month. If you are I don't even know how to say average amount of racing. Like I don't know what average amount of racing equates to, but like let's say back when you were doing it relatively consistently, like what would a month run you in terms of upkeep?
I don't know because I couldn't say I was ever really like a drifter in the sense that I was drifting like the guys who were drifting on the mountains. Where it's more like
Sure.
I go to like a parking lot and like do donuts, or maybe there was a turn I was very confident in, and I would
Yeah.
see like okay, I think I can slide like this one particular corner, but it hadn't gotten to the point where I was like going to because for drifting on a toge, there's like specific like this stretch of the road, like from this part to this part is the course, and then there might be like 6 or 7 corners, and then you learn each corner like sequentially. And I often even now like ride along with my friends, and for me the risk is too high. The danger of just crashing your car is just
Yeah.
it's too high for me to do. So like I never had a car that I felt like yeah I could lose this car.
Did people have like training cars, like kind of like not junk cars, but cars that they were more willing to bang up to learn those moves before they actually tried it in
Oh,
their?
I'm sure. I'm sure
Yeah,
there
Yeah,
are
I can't
people.
imagine wanting to race in like your really nice car, like
yeah,
right
they're
off the
called they're
bat.
called they're called missiles, and uh,
What a fitting name.
they're yeah like a missile, right? Like because you just send it, uh, and it's yeah they're often like really really banged up, and then often they get traded hands from one owner to like the next owner, and then it gets more and more banged up, and then it gets kind of patched together and held together by hopes and dreams, and just over time like these cars are just always on the verge of like falling apart, and they cost a lot of money to maintain. So I think if you what I noticed is like a lot of the guys who are really all about that drifting life, they also went to school to become like mechanics, and so then they can do like a lot of the
Oh,
Body work
by
and stuff
maintenance.
themselves.
themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Do
The
they, do
mechanic,
they
not
get to
just the
give
body work.
themselves their own? Do they get to give themselves their own shotgun?
That's a good question. I don't think because you need to go to a place that either has like the license to do it, or you need to take it to a facility to,
Yeah.
to do it, right? But there's ways
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, because I know shotgun's like a pain in the ass, and as you get an older car, like if it's, you know what, that's how they. I don't say it's con you, but like a lot of people lease or they buy and trade in, and like after a few
Right.
years, because the maintenance of the shotgun, like shotguns, like the car inspections that you have to do every, was it 2 or 3 years? I guess it depends
Yeah,
on the
every
age
two
of the
years.
car.
Yeah.
Um, and like the maintenance of it, I think for when I did mine, of course, my car I bought in June before my first year, and then I had to get shotgun done June of my last year of jet. So of course I had to drop like what was it, the equivalent of about $1,500
Hmm.
on shotgun costs.
Jeez.
And and then I had to sell the car to somebody, and that person tried to talk me down um, price wise because they're like, oh well, I'm like, come on, dude, I just dropped $1,500 on the shotgun. Like,
Hmm.
it's not that bad. You don't have to worry about it. Anyway, so digress. But if I imagine if you can do shotguns yourself, like if you're a certified like shotgun like person, someone who's
Hmm.
able to do it, has that license, that would save you so much cost there in terms of maintenance. And if you're able to keep up with the work on your car, you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Well, some people
Thousand.
even like they don't even go down that route like at
Oh,
all.
they
They
just don't
just
worry about
drive an unregistered car on the mountains,
it.
And like if worse comes to worse, they just ditch the car there and just run away. Like that's there's all kinds of characters
Oh yeah. Oh
up,
yeah.
up there in the mountains. But they're like a lot of the people. What they do basically is they so for drifting, you often need extreme modifications. So things like the camber. So you need the wheels to like be kind of cambered out
Yeah.
to give you like more traction in a turn. You need them to be like further out. You need to be able to, depending on how aggressive you want to drift, you need to be able to rotate the tires more, give like more steering angle. And so there are all these modifications that don't pass shaken that people like to do. And basically, what people do is they pass the shaken in a legal spec. So they'll change the tires, they'll take everything off, get it right to the edge of what is legally acceptable, pass it, and then immediately after put it
Modify
all
back.
back on. Yeah, modify it back, and then they can just drive around for 2 years and just hope that they don't get pulled over uh, during like a like an inspection. Maybe like a police car will just stop them and be like, "Hey, look, this code alto, like this is out, this is out, this is out." Um, and yeah, they just hope that doesn't happen. That's like a lot of us. Actually, some of the things on my car are illegal right now. Um, little things like a stickers on the front windshield. Like technically, that's very gray area.
Yeah.
People might like depending on the cop, they'll be like, "Yeah, you can't have this. That's a point." Or maybe if your wheels protrude past the fender, even if it's like 1 millimeter, like that might be out. So there are all these like little things. But yeah, basically, a lot of the folks will have connections. So they have connections to get like cheap tires, for example. So they might know like a shop that regularly gets tires that are going to be recycled anyway. So the previous owner doesn't want them because they're already used up, but they're good for drifting because the thread has almost no grip, so it's very
Yeah.
easy to drift it. So that's like a cheap way to get out
No,
there.
that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about
Yeah.
that. Like, I'm sure because a lot of people I know when I bring my car to my shop here in the U.S., they're like, "Oh, your tread is like super thin, like it's barely there." And
Yeah,
I'm like, "Yeah, just swap it out." So I mean, they take those tires off. I don't know what the hell they do with them after. Like you said,
right,
probably
Yeah.
recycle them or take them somewhere. So I'm
right,
sure if you have that kind of network, then it really works out, and you can get low cost used tires for those types of
yeah.
situations.
And then if you're a mechanic, then you know how to work on your own car. You know how to troubleshoot issues. You know how to fix them. Um, you also, by being in the community, you have access to other owners who have like the same car, and so you have all these. If you break something, you can ask, "Hey, does anybody know where I can get this, like like this fender or something?" And they can hook you up. So there's ways around it. But I think how much you want to spend on it really depends on how much you're willing to spend on any particular month. Like, it's definitely not a cheap hobby. You can go through a set of tires in like if you take your car to the track, you could go through a set of tires like in a day. So
Wow.
Ooh.
like like how much is like a set of tires? It might be $200 per tire or something, or $100 per tire. And often you would burn through the rears, right? The
Yeah.
fronts would usually still be okay because it's the rears that are getting all the as you're breaking traction, you're kind of burning through them.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon to go through like one or two sets of tires, or like two or four tires during one track day. And so that might be, I don't know, like a $500 day or something. But you might only do
Yeah.
that day like maybe like once a month or like once every couple of months or something. So it's partially about like going out for like these drifting nights, but it's also about the ownership experience of like having the car and like hanging out with your friends, and you'll meet up and you'll go to McDonald's together, and then like that's part of like the whole lifestyle of it. It's like
Yeah.
all these little things like customizing your car. And like now that I'm so in the world of this, I guess it's like I think it's like with anything, whatever your hobby is, you just throw money at it. If you're
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
into
true.
podcasting, you want to get like a nice mic or like a nice editing rig for making videos and stuff. So it's like well, I guess what I'm trying to say is like it doesn't feel like, oh, it's not worth it. Like you can
Yeah.
always
Right.
justify it to yourself somehow, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, earlier, Albo, you discussed kind of like your impressions of drifting with you mentioned Tokyo Drift, and even earlier you said Initial D, and that's kind of like the two things that I feel if anyone was to know about drifting, it would kind of be those two mediums. And so from your standpoint, would you say that that's pretty accurate for like the reality of like the drifting scene, or you know, are there some misconceptions in those mediums?
Well, Tokyo Drift is completely inaccurate. Um,
Shocking.
it's
That's the
Shocking,
franchise,
yeah,
right?
shocking.
I too was surprised. Yeah, it's a bit of a letdown to find out that it was not completely accurate. But the Initial D is like shockingly accurate, actually. I mean, there are some elements of it that are like very much so implausible. There's this one race, for example, where the way that the protagonist wins is by basically hopping like these 4 foot, like on each corner there's like a 4 foot drop. He would just cut that drop and just like jump in front of the car in front of him. um yeah, that doesn't happen. But or it might have been attempted to ill effect. But I think what's really fascinating is that there's so many elements of it that actually are very realistic. Not everything, of course, and there's definitely creative liberties that have been taken with like regards to like how there are like various teams that defend territories and go around battling other teams. Uh, from talking to the OGs in this community who are now in their 50s and late 50s, early 60s, who are really there in the early 90s and late 80s in the heyday of kind of street racing culture. From what they've told me, it was really like initially actually. So I think over time what's happened is the original scene in okay, I think what happened is the original scene influenced the anime, which then influenced the next generation of people who tried to kind of copy the anime and also learn from some of their senpai. And as the generations go on, that just kind of dilutes like more and more and more and creates like this weird loop. So um, nowadays, it's nowhere near as, I guess you could say, wild as it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, where it was really flat out and they were like, that's all there was to do. There was no internet, there was no TikTok, there was no podcast,
Yeah.
and there was no YouTube. It's like people were out just like out there just living their life, and that would be hanging out with their friends on Friday, Saturday night, and crashing into guardrails, and then maybe ditching that car, driving away, and then now you don't have a car, and maybe your buddy is like, oh, I'll sell you my car for $300. You're like, all right, let's do it. You buy another car, go drifting again, crash that one, and it was just this wild time. It was like the Wild West. Nowadays, like these same cars might be $10,000, $15,000, and
Yeah.
they've kind of been driven up by the demand for for those cars because of things like the movies, like Initial D and the Fast and Furious franchise, and also probably kind of partially my fault. Making videos about this whole world, people are like, oh hey, that's cool, and that kind of might have driven the price up as well. So
Well,
yeah.
so, like, for someone, maybe let's say someone coming to Japan, or not even just Japan, but just in racing in general, and they're trying to like teach themselves like drifting and different like driving. I almost said wrestling. I don't know why I said wrestling. Racing.
You can enjoy both.
Yeah. um, for someone maybe like trying to learn different racing techniques, like do you have and they're just discouraged, they're just frustrated because maybe they aren't picking it up or anything. Do you have any advice or maybe some things that you've learned along the way that you
Yeah,
can
because
impart
I'm
on
sure
them?
being behind the wheel of one of those cars can be quite intimidating, honestly. I mean, I would be intimidated.
I think it's yeah, it definitely seems intimidating, but it's not as scary or crazy or intimidating as you might think. I think it just starts with first trying to figure out like which car you think is cool, and then just maybe following like some car people on Instagram who have like cool cars, and then over time you develop like a sense of like, oh, I think this is cool. And you might discover, you thought drifting was cool, but maybe you're not really into it. Maybe there's this you're into like time attack, and really, I think it's also going to come down to people you meet. So maybe, for example, you really love the idea of the aforementioned like getting into time attack, but maybe your first car friend is like really into rally racing, like dirt rally, or even like I don't know, monster trucks or something, or
Yeah.
like overlanding, which is like this idea of basically taking your SUV, putting a tent on top of it, and going camping everywhere. I love that, and I think it's just making friends, just within whatever you think is cool. Just try to, if there's like a local meetup spot where some cool cars sometimes gather, just drive there and just go try to meet people, hang out. Car enthusiasts are usually pretty nice. Probably the easiest group of people to break the ice with. You just go and ask them about their car. It doesn't matter if you're a neophyte or if you know nothing about cars. Like everyone was there at one point, so everyone is very happy and excited to tell you about their um, all their different modifications and what those modifications do and why they chose them and what they like about their cars. So I think it just starts with expressing an interest like in people, and not just their cars, but them as well. It's like you ask them, like, why did you get into this? Like, you can ask them about the concerns that you have. You're like, oh, don't you think it's like too expensive, or don't you think that like do you think it's worth it to get into this? Blah blah blah. And they'll just level with you. They'll be like, yeah, it's might cost a lot of money, but this is like super fun. It's a really cool community, and I think that's what it comes down to. Basically, it's like the community that you're choosing to become a part of. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have friends, you're not going to continue. It's the same thing with something like language learning, right? It's like you can study from a book all you want, but if you have nobody to talk to, then you're kind of like going to be running with one foot
Yeah.
tied behind your back.
I
Hopping on
get
one leg or something. Yeah, yeah.
it.
So yeah, I mean, I guess just try to meet people within the car communities, and over time you'll develop like a greater sense of what you like,
Okay.
and then just go from there. Yeah.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah, it's really good advice. All right, so we're kind of approaching the end, but surprise, we actually have a couple more questions for you that have nothing to do with racing or drifting. Just a couple sometimes with our guests in our other episodes that we like to ask them a couple fun questions, just
The
to
wild card questions.
the wild card. Yeah.
There we go.
So it's nothing too intimidating or anything like that, but just some fun stuff to get to know you a little bit more. So my first question to you is, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Uh, that would definitely have to be "A Whole New World" by Aladdin. Um, oh yeah.
So
Yes.
do you sing both parts, Jasmine or Aladdin?
I I mean, it depends who I'm with, but I I've been known to sing both as necessary.
That's a popular one. I feel like
Oh yeah,
like
it's
karaoke, just in Japan and the U.S. Like I've seen it so many times done, and I mean I know I've done it before, multiple times, both parts or either.
it's a crowd pleaser. Yeah,
It really is.
it's also easy to sing, like
Yeah,
surprisingly easy
It
to
is.
get that note right. So
yeah, yeah.
you can
Um,
disguise your lack of skill, which I
yeah.
definitely don't have very much of.
You got to reenact actually flying on a carpet, right? Like while you're doing it, just like.
Yeah. I just kind of wave my coat around.
All right, next question. What is your favorite konbini? And at that konbini, what is your favorite snack?
All right, so it's definitely 7-Eleven.
Another 7-Eleven. Yes.
Yeah, that's the
Yes,
overwhelming winner here. We haven't had much
yeah.
other options, but yeah,
We're a 7-Eleven tribe. There's something about 7-Elevens and cars. Like when you park in front of them, it's got a vibe to it. I think it's just the
It
colors,
does. I've noticed that on your
right?
Instagram. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's the main reason. Probably it's very silly. Um, my go to snack at the conveni is there's this really good. It's kind of seasonal. I think it's seasonal because sometimes disappears, but it's the taco meat burrito.
What?
And oh yeah,
They have
it's
those?
Mm.
yeah, it's great. You know,
Okay.
like the ham and cheese burritos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like
Yes, yeah.
the like the kind of like flat, right? Like
Oh yeah, yep.
yeah.
I also live by those. Um, so that's great. Side note: the really cool thing about 7-Eleven these days is they have discovered that there's this opportunity to be like the go-to place for healthy foods, healthy snacks, and healthy meals actually. So right now I'm on this diet, and like in the past month I've lost like 10 pounds, so 15 pounds from just eating at the conveni like almost every day. They have like these
Wow.
protein salads where it's
Okay.
basically like lettuce and sliced pork with yuzu sauce, like a shabu shabu,
Yeah.
Ooh.
and it's like 150 calories. It's super huge and super filling, and it's like 30 grams of protein. Um, so that's probably my favorite right now, actually. Yeah, it's
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, that's cool. I haven't I usually when I go to 7-Eleven, it's usually grab an onigiri or like just a snack off the shelf somewhere, or coffee or
yeah.
beer.
Remember at the beginning we were talking about the keto diet.
Yeah,
You could totally do the keto diet with just 7-Eleven now. It's crazy.
that's insane. Yeah, I they never really. I mean, they had meals like you can get like those little salads with like the goma dressing.
Yeah,
Like the with like I don't even remember what's on it, but you can get those. And that was like kind of like the only real healthy thing they ever served there for a while. And it's good to know that they have options
yeah. It's
if
a
you're looking
it's
to.
it's a new thing. It's like a this season thing. So thank
Okay,
you 7-Eleven for
there you
market
go. There you go.
research. Yeah.
All right, so one more question for you. What is your favorite touristy spot in Japan?
Hmm.
So I know you're
Hmm.
doing a trip right now. I don't know if you're still on the trip or if you've gotten back, but when you're traveling, what is your like favorite place to go?
So I'm back from the trip now. Last week I actually took my fellow YouTuber friend on this exact trip, and it's actually just back in Gunma. It's all the spots that show up in Initial D because Initial D has kind of become the city's like main source of tourism. I guess
Yeah,
it's the main famous thing that emerged from that area. So there's all
Yeah.
these like not just the onsen town, which is featured in the anime, but there's like several restaurants which appear in it, and then there's like several like spots. But then of course there's also the real life location of the old tofu shop. There's like a museum, and then there's like the actual toge, which you can drive like for real in real life. And it's super fun as a car enthusiast to actually do that kind of like pilgrimage to the real
Yeah.
life Initial D spots.
what
It's
what's the
super
name of the
awesome.
city?
So the city where the tofu shop was is called Shibukawa,
Okay,
and the onsen town right beside it is called Ikaho, and
okay,
the main mountain range is called Haruna. In the anime, it's called Akina. So it's one of those little things where the
yeah,
They
the
tweak the
author
name a little.
tweak,
Yeah.
yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, it's like they changed the season. So in Japanese, Haruna means like, well, haru means spring, right? So in
Spring.
real life it's spring, but in the anime it's aki, so it's fall. So it's
Fall.
like a fall mountain versus the
Nice.
spring mountain.
there you go.
So
All
yeah,
right.
definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I never been to that area. Again, my experiences in going to Gunma have been Kiryu and Takasaki. So I don't think I've really been much else outside of that. So I guess I have something to check out next time I'm going on a road trip. I'm going to be back in Japan in about a month and a half. So
Oh, are you?
maybe I'll do a side trip to Gunma. I don't know. Yeah,
Well, let me
yeah.
know. Yeah, let's swing by, and my wife is from Takasaki, so I'm there
Okay,
quite often. So yeah, we can
okay,
always. It's very close. Like the initial D area is like 30 minutes away from Takasaki. So
cool.
it's then let me know.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Jen,
Awesome.
do you have? I
Yeah.
don't. Do you have any fun questions you want to ask or?
No, but I do want to give Albo a chance to, pitch all of your things that you want to pitch to our listeners. So, where can they find you? Where can they watch your stuff? Give our listeners a hint of where they can find you at.
Well, I'm really hoping that a few of your listeners will subscribe to my little YouTube channel and help me grow it just a little bit more, almost there to my goal.
Is it 400,000?
It's
What are you trying to get to?
I passed it.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. We
I
already
just passed it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think like a day ago or something. Yeah, so just if you search Albo ALBO on YouTube, Instagram, just search on Google. I think you'll probably find me, as well as some chocolate bars, which for some reason have the same name.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Not keto, but yeah.
Nope.
But yeah, I would definitely check out Albo's YouTube channel. Also, he's on Instagram. I know from personal experience, so definitely go check him out. Totally worth it. Really good posting, and thank you for coming on.
Thank
on
you.
the podcast for us. I love this topic. I've been wanting to do something kind of pop culture-ish, but like old school pop culture. So I'm glad that you were able to help us dive into the world of drifting.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in to the Krewe of Japan podcast. And a very special thank you to Albo Agunday of Albo Media for joining us for this great chat. As someone whose exposure to underground car culture in Japan was limited to Initial D and Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, personally, I got a lot out of this conversation. I hope you did too. Want to learn more about drifting, street racing, or just Japan's street racing culture and scene? Head over to Albo's YouTube channel. We have links to his channel in the show notes. Or just open up YouTube and search Albo Media. Also, if you want to see some phenomenal photography, check out Albo's Instagram at albo.media, ALBO.MEDIA. Link to that and a few other things in the show notes as well. Do you have experiences in Japan racing or driving? Share with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Krewe of Japan Podcast. That's Instagram, KREWEOFJAPANPODCAST. Twitter, @KREWEOFJAPAN. And on Facebook, just look for Krewe of Japan Podcast. I'm not going to spell it for a third time. Oh, by the way, we're on TikTok now, so check us out on there as well. While you're there, give us a like, follow, retweet, share, comment, I don't know, whatever floats your boat. Let us know how you're enjoying the podcast, or perhaps you prefer to provide your feedback in a more private setting. Send us an email at kreweofjapanpodcast@gmail.com. That's KREWOFJAPANPODCAST@gmail.com. Speaking of feedback, if you are enjoying what you're listening to today, last week, the week before that, the week before that, the week before that, all season long, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast streaming app. Trying to level up that rating game, y'all. Seriously, any and all support is incredibly and greatly appreciated. That's it for today, so until next time.